just land! Never been so happy to see anything like that. Hi, Lee Frank Spencer, former bootneck, served for 24 years in the Royal Marines. I lost my leg in 2014 after stopping at the scene of an accident. I'm a current holder of 4 Guinness World Records for rowing across the oceans.
Welcome everybody, Russ McDonough, aka The Nomadic Veteran, and welcome to this week's video and episode 7 of the Vet Files. This week's guest, Lee Spencer. Lee did a tour out in Iraq, 3 tours of Afghan, and came back without a scratch. However, it was a crazy sequence of events back here in the UK that actually led to him losing his leg. What makes this story inspirational is 1, the way Lee bounced back so quickly, and 2, Lee not wanting to be defined by his disability, and in the process actually earning 4 Guinness World Records. And that's just the beginning. Anyway, I don't want to steal Lee's thunder. Here's his dit. Enjoy.
Joining the Royal Marines was a dream of mine since before I can remember, really. I grew up with the Falklands War being a very big part of my childhood, watching it on the news, and the Royal Marines were the forefront of that. I think it goes beyond that. I didn't want to be in the Marines. I wanted to be that person. I wanted to be a Royal Marine. So there isn't one specific thing that happened in my life that made me go, that's what I wanted to be. It was a kind of accumulation of lots of things. After several failed attempts at joining the Corps, well, I eventually joined up after going to the careers office. First of all, when I was 18 and getting turned down at the interview stage, being told that you're not what we required. And even if you was to go back to when I was 13 in school at the careers fair, I went up to the Royal Marine there and said, I want to be a Royal Marine. And he basically said, you're not really what we're looking for. I finally got through the interview stage and got onto a potential recruits course, now called a potential Royal Marines course, and passed it, scraped a pass, and got into training, got into a troop in 1992, and really flourished. For me, joining up was not only achieving my life goal of being a Royal Marine, it was more than that. It was finding something that I was finally good at, or something that I could really achieve at, and that was not giving in. And I found that for me, that was the trick of not only getting through training but actually flourishing. So I passed out and went to 4-2 Commando K Company, and I actually found it not difficult, is the wrong way to put it, but you feel that, you know, once you join the Royal Marines and you become that person you always wanted to be, then like all of your struggles are over. But they're not, they're really just beginning, because now you're surrounded by these people who are just amazing at everything they do, and you go back to being at the bottom of the pile again. So it's like the struggle starts all over again. In 2014, after 3 tours of Afghanistan and 1 tour of Iraq, I was travelling back to work after Christmas leave, and I stopped at a scene of an accident. And whilst I was helping out, where a car had crashed into the central reservation, I was helping the other people out who had come from that car. Another car crashed into theirs, and an engine block and gearbox came flying out, hit me, took my right leg off below the knee, and completely dislocated my left leg at my knee, and very nearly died. If it wasn't for the help from a passing Rastafarian who I instructed, managed to get a tourniquet, that really didn't do anything. We couldn't get it tight enough. So luckily he had his adult daughter with him, and I got her to stand on the femoral arm, and that stopped the flow of blood and saved my life. My first stay in Headley Court, straight after losing my leg and coming out of NHS hospital, the first night there, I met a guy who had no legs and a big beard called Carl West, and he'd literally just come back from rowing the Atlantic with a team of 2 amputees and 2 able-bodied guys, a team of 4. And that was the first thing that I had, that life as an amputee could still be adventurous. Like, when it first happened to me, I thought that side of my life had now gone, and I wouldn't be able to do anything like that. And that was the first idea that I had that, you know, that wasn't true, that there was still adventurous things I could do. And then towards the end of the first year as an amputee, I got an email asking for volunteers to put together the first all-amputee crew to row an ocean. And because of that first meeting with Cal, I applied, went through a protracted and quite a long selection process, the end of which I was lucky enough to be named a member of Road to Recovery's all-amputee crew of 4 to row an ocean. Being the only bootneck on the boat, there's kind of that added pressure because you kind of feel that you've got to be the best. And there was a moment in the first or second night, I can never remember, because the first week was the worst week of my life up until that point, and the first 48 hours were awful. And there was a moment where, like, we was rowing 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and there was a knock at the door, like 10 minutes, and that was your 10-minute call to get out and row. And I kind of almost went into a panic attack, thinking, I ain't going to be able to do this. I'm going to be the one who's going to let the team down. And I even felt the arrogance of thinking that I could row across the ocean. Up until that point, the most nautical thing I'd done was the Tor Point ferry in Plymouth drunk. And then all of a sudden I'm in a tiny little rowing boat on my own. And it took every scrap of moral courage I had to get out of that cabin. And as soon as I sat down and pulled on the oars the first time, it was like that spell had been broken, because I realised I could do it. When I lost my leg, I thought the person that I was, that person who defined themselves by physicality, by what they could do physically, I thought I'd gone forever, and I'd have to redefine myself, but within the parameters of disability, I suppose. And there was a moment, it was about 3/4 of the way across, it was a eureka moment where I realised that I was still the same person. There's a record for rowing from mainland Europe to mainland South America, and it was set in 2002 by a Norwegian called Steinhoff, and he'd done it in 96 days, 12 hours and 45 minutes. And I thought I could beat that record. So that started the thought about, if I as a disabled person could beat an able-bodied record in something as physically demanding as rowing an ocean, that would send a massive precedent, set a massive precedent, and a massive statement that no one should be defined by disability. And then I started thinking about how I had set out to define myself by disability and how stupid and wrong I was for doing that. And then I started thinking about how, in general, not always, but often, we in society, we kind of define disabled people by that disability. So all those things kind of tied in together, and that's where I got the idea from rowing the second time solo from mainland Europe to mainland South America. And then 3 days before I was due to set off, my start date, unfortunately my mum died, which was as awful as you can imagine. And then I had to postpone the row and deal with everything that a bereavement of that nature brings up. So actually getting to the start line, and the year after I intended to start, there was a lot of hurdles I had to overcome. The routine that I was working typically, it didn't really vary much from this, but was during the day was 2 hours on, 1 hour off, and then through the night 2 on, 2 off. I've been in tricky situations, I've been in scary situations, but being scared when you're part of a team is a completely different thing to being scared when you're on your own. And you got to remember, in the middle of the Atlantic, at times the closest human being to me was in the International Space Station, a couple of 100 miles that way. I was the only human for hundreds of miles, so I was probably about as alone as it's possible to be. And being alone and being scared when you're on alone, the fear kind of seeps into every part of your being. It overtakes every thought, and that was really difficult. Crossing the line on the first row was probably the most incredible thing that had ever happened to me. Crossing the line on my solo run, the last row, was actually the exact opposite. The last 2 weeks of the row, I hit the wall, and because of the nature of the currents and everything that was happening, not rowing wasn't an option. I had to keep going at the same pace. So after hitting the wall, the mental gymnastics I'd have to go through just to get out and continuous rowing meant that I then became mentally exhausted, and after becoming physically exhausted and mentally exhausted, I became emotionally exhausted. And that last 2 weeks is by a country mile the hardest, most difficult, most bleakest thing I've ever done, to the point where even for months after the row, actually thinking about it in a positive way was really difficult. It had that much of an effect on me. I set out to beat an able-bodied record of 96 days, 12 hours and 45 minutes. I got across in 60 days, 16 hours and 6 minutes. So I beat the able-bodied record for rowing the Atlantic by 36 days. I also got the record as being the first physically disabled person to row any ocean from mainland to mainland. And I think Guinness were doing a bog off, buy one get one free, because I also threw in the longest ocean row by a physically disabled person. So I ended up getting 3 Guinness World Records for that row. If I was to give anyone some advice on undertaking a challenge, physical challenge, or taking yourself out of your comfort zone, we as humans are so incredible, and we just don't know what we're capable of. So that would be my advice, is understand that when you think you are at your absolute limit, you're probably only about 50% in. And I don't know, I'm not even 100% sure that the universe works this way, but always do things for the right reason, not for how you want to be perceived, how you want people to see you. Do things because you think they're right and they're a good thing to do. I think that's probably the most important thing. Or how I look at something. If an opportunity comes up, I always go, why do I want to do that? And if it's for the right reason, then do it.
And what a story that is. Isn't it crazy how life turns out? Anyway, first off, I want to thank Lee for taking the time to sit down with me and tell me his story. Second of all, I've got to admit, it was really hard editing this video, purely because Lee has some outrageous stories to tell of his time out at sea, all on his own. So, with that being said, we did do a sit-down podcast. If you'd like to listen to that, I'll put the link in the description below. It is awesome. However, that is it for this week. So, if you enjoyed this video, thumbs up. If you'd like to comment or share the video, please do. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, do it. That'll be awesome. Anyway, until next week, laters.